One of the most important things to understand about American politics today is that there is no difference between Democrat, socialist, democratic socialist, and communist. Let me explain. What is a socialist? Socialism, if you look it up in the dictionary, is where the government controls the means of production and the distribution of income. Basically, government control. Now, when Bernie Sanders says he's a democratic socialist, if you look that up, it simply means that they achieved socialism by the ballot box. Well, the Nazis did that. The Nazis were socialists. I know most people don't think they were, but the Z in Nazi stands for National Socialist. So you can achieve socialism by the ballot box. That's what Bernie Sanders wants to achieve. Now, people claim the Scandinavian countries in Europe are socialists. They are not. They are private capitalistic nations. They may have higher tax rates than the United States in some areas, but not in corporate taxes. And they may provide some benefits that the United States doesn't provide, but they are not socialist. The socialist nations have always failed. Now, I asserted at the beginning that there is no difference between democratic and socialist, or democratic socialist. Now, if you want to find evidence for that, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who's the current head of the Democratic National Party, when asked in several interviews recently, what is the difference between being a Democrat and being a socialist, she was stumped. And all she could do was try and draw phony distinctions in trying to set up republicanism as bad. But she has no idea, because there essentially isn't. Now, today, the Democratic Party is a very far cry from what it was under JFK, Kennedy. He was a supply-sider like Reagan. He believed, like Republicans do today, that if you cut taxes, you will spur economic growth, which is exactly what happened under Reagan, and which is what caused the Clinton financial expansion during the early part of his term. If you increase taxes, like Bernie Sanders wants to do, you end up hurting income. I mean, just think about the Soviet Union, which we call communism, but it essentially is socialism. It was where the government controls the means of production and the distribution of income. There were long lines for basic products. Venezuela today is a socialist country. They are starving. They're eating their pets. There was a study yesterday that 80% of basic goods in Venezuela are in deep shortages. That's what happens when the government tries to organize anything. I mean, let me give you 4 quick examples of that in the United States today. First of all, Sanders, and to some extent Clinton, want to nationalize medical care. And Obamacare started us on the way. The government now pretty much controls 1/6 of all medical care. It destroyed the best medical system in the world. It was based on lies, as Jonathan Gruber, the architect of Obamacare, admitted. You can't keep your doctor, you can't keep your plan. Rates, instead of going down $2,500 a family, went skyrocketing, and they continue to increase. People have huge deductibles, and doctors are dropping out. They're so frustrated. It was all based on lies. And now, think about the one area of medicine which is completely controlled by the government. And is that good? The veterans. Obama himself, in 2007, when he was campaigning for the first time, talked about how awful the VA was, and he did nothing about it. It's still horrible. In fact, the head of it just said, oh, it's like waiting in line at Disneyland, except people waiting in line at Disneyland don't die waiting to see a doctor like they do in the VA. And this moron, Bernie Sanders, wants to expand that VA system to the whole country, put 350 million people under an inept government bureaucracy running healthcare? I don't think so. That's what socialism is and how terrible it is. Think about another government agency, the TSA. 70,000 people, as I record this, have missed their flights recently because of long lines in TSA. The government is inept. Now, certain things have to be government. We want government to do the police and the fire, and we want them to have the military. Even the post office has had to improve significantly because it faced threats of competition from UPS, from FedEx. And so whenever there's competition injected in the system, it becomes much better. I'll give you an example. Wall Street Journal the other day had an editorial explaining a massive new study which shows that children who are have vouchers do much better than children in public schools. And the opponents of vouchers used to say, oh, that's only because the parents are more motivated. Well, the study tested for that too and found that it's simply untrue. If you give the government a monopoly, it will do a bad job. You have to inject private into it because that spurs competition. And that's what Bernie Sanders and the Democrats simply do not understand. Take poverty. The government said, we're going to try and reduce poverty. What happened after 8 years of Obama? Record poverty. I heard that the Democrats care about the poor. Well, they may in their hearts care about them, but their policies hurt the poor. We have transferred $22 trillion since Lyndon Johnson's war on poverty, 1964. We have 6 generations of welfare dependency. We have skyrocketing illegitimate teenage birth rates, massive increase in gangs, and record poverty. That's what happens when you ask the government to do something like redistribute income. It doesn't work. The best way to redistribute income is the capitalist system. Just take this minimum wage where they're forcing a $15 increase to $15 minimum wage. Governor Brown, a leftist and California governor, said he knows it was bad economics, but he had to because of the unions. Well, what's happening? Millions and millions and millions of people are going to lose their entry-level jobs because companies say, we can't afford that, so we're going to robotize our programs. That's what's happening all over the country. And so as you think about all of these different aspects of it, you see that socialism is terrible. They're eating their pets in Venezuela, Bernie. Don't you understand? And recently, when he was on Univision being interviewed, he was asked to explain the failures of socialism everywhere they've been tried. And he said, I'm too busy running for president to answer that question. Now, if you add up his proposals so far, it's $19 trillion more in expenditures. Now, before Obama, we had about $9 trillion in debt accumulated by 43 presidents, which is way too much. Obama complained about it, and then he doubled it to $19 trillion. And Bernie wants to double that again. That's what socialism gives you. So bottom line, the head of the Democratic Party cannot explain any difference between Democratic and socialist. There is no difference between socialists like Venezuela and Democratic socialists. As I said, the only difference is you get it at the ballot box. And finally, communism is no different either. Communism, if you look it up, according to Marx, is where everybody gets each according to his need, each according to his own. But it ends up being a government bureaucracy, basically socialism. As Lenin said, the major thinker of communism, the goal of socialism is communism. And so that is a fundamental failure of this leftist view, which seems to have taken over a lot of America, and it's just going to destroy the greatest economic system the world has ever seen, capitalism, which has lifted more people out of poverty than any other. You know, massive inequality has grown under Obamonomics. Do you know that? It's a much greater gap between the rich and the poor under this leftist economic system of Obama. It'll get much worse under Bernie. It's a disaster and must be fought.